Okay, we are live streaming, we are recording. May begin.
All right, we'll call this special meeting of the Board of Finance to order. I'll do a quick roll call to make sure all the Board of Finance members are on. Myself, Tim O'Brien, and Glenn Frischman are in the Police Department meeting room. Mike Feuerbach, are you on?
I'm here.
Lynn Young?
Here.
Bob Stashen?
Present.
Deb Norman?
Here.
And Dave Motherway.
Here.
Okay, and we have Jim Sullivan and Jill Senior online as well. And in the Police Department meeting room here, we have the First Selectman and a cadre of officers and chiefs and lieutenants and a whole bunch of them here. It's almost like we're dealing with the police department today. So new business we'll go right into, the budget presentations, police department with the SIP, and I will turn it over to you, Chief.
Good evening to the Board of Finance, and thanks for the opportunity to present the police department's budget for the next fiscal year. Behind me, I have not only the captain, but the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners, our 2 lieutenants, and 3 sergeants are in the back as well. So we have the bulk of the command staff here at the police department here for support of the budget and some of the line items that we're going to present tonight. Obviously, there's some things in the budget that are different from years past. Some things that changed this past year, in particular COVID, and some of the law changes in the state of Connecticut that made certain items in the police budget that we have to fund by law nowadays. But this past year, I just wanted to bring out some highlights, in particular the work of the officers that have been at the police department that have come to work every day, day in and day out. We had 2 personnel go down with COVID and returned in short order. And that sort of goes to the fact of them taking things seriously. Our janitorial staff that has been in on weekends even to sanitize the building, wipe things down, and keep things rolling here to have the officers out there and to protect the public and be there and do what they need to do. We've had officers save lives during the pandemic, where we had a COVID officer that we assigned to go out and assist human services and go out and meet with the elderly, meet with the public, obviously social distancing. And at one point in time, a particular individual that we were checking on a regular basis was found on the floor, and the officer was able to get to her, get her the help she needed. Otherwise, it was not going to go well at all for her. The officers are out there. We have had a series of stolen cars, vehicles broken into, as many communities in the state of Connecticut has had, and we are responding to those type of calls. The budget here represents what is needed for public safety in the town of Stonington as we continue to grow, as we continue to evolve, as we continue to adapt to our situation in policing today. So with that, we will answer any questions that the board has. We have Lieutenant Schneider and Lieutenant Peckham here that have very small presentations, or I should say quicker presentations, just to hit home some of the points that I think are important to justify why we need certain things and what we need in today's day and age to continue to police. So with that, I think you mentioned you wanted to go right into SIP, Mr. Chair.
We'll do it however you want to do it. If you want to go through operating first, that's fine.
I think why don't we do operating first, because some of the things in there that I think will flop over, go into SIP, and then obviously the bid waiver when it comes to the body cameras, which we did hear from the town attorney today. So I just left that with you.
I saw that. Yeah. We didn't have a chance to circulate it, but no. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with operating, because I think that'll roll naturally into SIP.
Thank you. So if there's any questions along the line, please stop. Obviously, if we go right through, to begin with, it's personnel, and that is usually the bulk of everything that we have in the police department. In particular, if you went to line 4, which is the salary of sergeants, you will see that is up by 19% plus, and that is because in this year's budget, we are requesting an additional sergeant. We are not requesting more personnel in the department as far as officers go. We have 39 sworn officers in the PD, so that number would not change. Our change is the number of supervisors that we have, in particular sergeants. We currently have 6 sergeants. 1 is a detective sergeant, 5 on patrol, and through our staff meetings and discussions with the gentlemen that we have in the back of the room, there are certain things that are coming down the pike, have come down the pike as far as administration goes, that we are needing to do, have to do, should do, that have gone on long enough as far as the police department goes. More and more is being asked of our supervisors to not only supervise out on the road, to be out there and available for officers, and that's required in many cases by the public to have supervision and be out there, but also administratively inside. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Schneider, who would like to say a few things when it comes to the sergeants and why we are asking for that that additional sergeant. We have the full support of the Board of Police Commissioners when it comes to this. It's been long overdue, and I think we can get into some of the issues that we're facing nowadays with police accountability that we need additional oversight. So Lieutenant Schneider.
Good evening, and thanks for allowing me to present. I'm going to defer for a moment to share the screen. If Roger Kaiser could help me out real quick. I have a really quick PowerPoint presentation that just easily allows me to hit the highlights without having to flip through my notes. So hopefully we can get this going. If not, I'll defer to my notes and I'll just kind of hit some of the highlights as to why we're looking for that additional sergeant's position, which I think is going to be hugely important to the department on a number of aspects. Thanks, Roger. So this discussion's been going on long before it's come to you, especially amongst the supervisory staff here in the police department. And we've kind of brought it up to the chain of command and presented it to the chief and captain this past year during staff meetings on how important we think adding that extra sergeant's position is going to be, especially with police accountability in the future. So with that said, I'm going to just quickly go over this. Some of this PowerPoint has to do with more contractually and was presented to the chief by me in that regard. I don't need to go into any of that. I'm going to talk more about the fiscal benefits since we're here in front of the Board of Finance. Part of our proposal to the chief had to do with the sergeants maintaining responsibilities, the current shortage of frontline supervision, and why that frontline supervision is so important to a police department. Current, as the chief had previously mentioned, we're jumping ahead here, touchy screen. Current supervisory staffing levels here at the police department sit at 6 sergeants, 5 assigned to patrol, 1 to detectives, 2 lieutenants, myself and Lieutenant Peck, and then obviously the captain and chief. Frontline supervision, when we talk about frontline supervision in the police department, we're talking about the sergeants themselves. And obviously the 3 of them are here and they're obviously in full support of our request tonight. They're integral to the day-to-day operations. They're kind of the link between the patrol and the admin, and they're the ones making the tough decisions on scene. And I'll highlight some of the reasons why I think it's so important that we kind of create a better environment for them here. Sergeants have the responsibility of, are we going to make an arrest on scene, report and affidavit review, court management, things like that, but they also are tasked with a ton of administrative responsibilities that sometimes you forget about, like the K-9 unit supervision, overtime assignments and scheduling, all those road jobs that you see out in the field, who's scheduling them, who's facilitating that, animal control supervision, grant administration. I could go on and on. There's dozens and dozens of these little things that make the department run efficiently that are primarily handled by the sergeants. And every time we give them an administrative function, that's less and less time they have to be in the field supervising those officers, which, as we know now, is becoming more and more critical. Expectations of sergeants, of course, we expect them to be leaders, mentors, and motivators. We expect them to be the liaisons, as I just mentioned, between the administration and the patrol unit. Again, they're the most essential part of our department. I can't emphasize that enough. Our patrol division is where the bulk of the work's being done that the community sees. our community bases its perception on the interactions they have with the patrol division. How the patrol division is supervised is going to be vitally important to the success of the department. Increased supervisory responsibilities are not likely to reverse in the coming years, and that's pulling that supervision away from the patrol guys and putting it on the administrative side, which is becoming more and more tasky. On a side note that individually impacts all of them are the work conditions that the sergeants hold right now. Currently, just so you give a brief overview of what their work schedules look like, currently there's one sergeant assigned to each shift, and then there's 2 floating sergeants. There are very few overlapping shifts for them, so anytime they take a day off, it opens up a spot for overtime potentially, and that's where we'll go into some of the fiscal areas. The current workload does not allow them to complete either effectively their administrative tasks or their supervisory tasks. So they're doing a little bit here and a little bit there, but they're not doing either very effectively. On top of that, floating sergeants have pretty terrible schedules. And this is something that they can never get out of. This isn't something that you start as a new sergeant and you gradually work your way out of it. You can have 33 years on it, some of the individuals here, and still work this schedule. That schedule includes things like working a day, a night, and an eve as your 4 days on. That's 8 on, 8 off, 8 on, 8 off, and that's your schedule for the duration of your career as a sergeant. That does not change. Eve, day, night, night. So you come in for eves, you get out at 11, you're back in for days at 7, and then you're back in for nights. And then you start another evening shift again. Imagine trying to have the responsibility of being that mentor, that liaison to the patrol division, and you're constantly running on 8 hours of sleep. That's going to negatively impact the patrol division at some point, because an exhausted boss all the time is probably not going to be the boss that you want to work for every day. So part of this is going to eliminate that type of work schedule for these sergeants, adding that one sergeant. Constantly stressed and fatigued supervisory staff obviously takes its toll on it, and it makes it tough for sergeant recruitment and retention. So when we have a sergeant test, we always have this ongoing discussion of who wants it, and a lot of the times we hear nobody does, because they see that schedule coming up. So without getting too much further into that, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the reasons internally why we presented this to the chief, and why it'll work here within this meeting itself. A lot of this is contractual. Let's get down to the cost. Annual salary of a top step patrolman right now is $81,963. Top step for a sergeant is $90,557. That is about an $8,500 difference in pay, and that's what you're seeing in the increase in the operating budget this year. The additional sergeant, however, is going to help negate some of that overtime cost. Lieutenant Peckham and I did a pretty careful analysis. In the last 3 years, the department has averaged 480 hours of shift overtime specific to filling supervisory spots. That, if you give an average based on our salaries across the board for supervisory staff, equates to about $36,000 a year, which is a pretty good chunk of our overtime for a very small portion of the officers that it's really impacting, meaning 5 sergeants. By adding that sergeant, we think that number in itself will be cut in half because that open vacancies based on contractual language and stuff will be filled in a much more effective manner. Now, there's a lot of things that obviously will impact that, and we can't say for certain on a year-to-year basis whether that's a guaranteed number. Long-term vacancies and things may make that fluctuate, but we're almost assuming that $8,900 operating increase will be negated by the overtime cost that we'll save on the back end, adding that sergeant. So that was just a real quick summary of the reasons why we came to this decision and where we're at. If you have any questions, we're all here to answer anything that you have for us.
So the bottom line with the sergeants of having lived that many years ago, but you have Sergeant Beebe who just stepped out 35 years, Louis Diamante with 35 years, Tim Marley, 24 years. So these guys and gals.
None of you guys look a day over 30.
They appreciate that, but I think they appreciate the fact that we can break it into right now instead of having these rotating sergeants that work, a day here and then 8 hours later. If you get off on the evening shift and have to be back at day shift, you're not walking through the door and falling asleep like that. You're up for a couple hours, back up again, you're working on 4 or 5 hours, and then having to go back in that night, try to sleep in the evening before that. It's just not working anymore. And with the demands that are out there and the amount of work that we have to throw at them now, we're going to talk about cameras. We're going to talk about not only the camera system and having somebody administer the camera system, but these supervisors now are going to have to audit the officers to ensure certain things down the road that are out there. We have OSHA issues that we have to have a supervisor assigned to just to do that. We have training that has to happen, and specialized training for supervisors. Lieutenant Peckham, with the amount of mandates that are coming down, we almost have one officer off the road year-round, and if you added the hours up, so it's not 39 officers, it's really 38, because we have somebody in training all the time, just to keep up with the mandates that we have as police officers in Connecticut. So for very little money, the $8,000 difference, we are going to make our command staff more efficient, more effective, be able to handle things better, have better oversight that's out there that's needed, and in turn, better service, not only inside this building, but to the public in general, because we're going to have a cadre of supervisors that can work. So what our plan really is right now we have this rotation of 2 supervisors, then you never know. We would have 2 supervisors on days, seconds, thirds. Obviously, there's days that overlap. Some do not. When they overlap, they're able to take care of administrative job functions that they have or training that needs to occur instead of this bouncing around. So if you talk to any of the supervisors, having been there, I'd rather work straight third shift for a time period than to be bounced from day to day, back and forth, and not know whether you're up or down or what's going on with your body system. It just will work better. And what's happening too is the 2 lieutenants, if one of the sergeants are out and they happen to be working, we task the lieutenant then to run the shift. And on top of their administrative tasks they have, that is more and more has been asked of them, they now are running a shift and they never catch up with their stuff. They're constantly having to do that. And then if we have a big case that goes on, they're involved in that, and they're spread even thinner. So with this, it makes sense for us. We're not changing the number of police officers that we have on the rolls, but we are basically doing a restructuring, a mini restructuring for $8,000. And that's the pitch that we're making tonight that we think is essential as we move forward to address the continuing demands on police services. Anything, guys?
I got a question, Chief.
Okay.
Tim?
Hang on 1 second, Lynn. Does any
Sergeant BB here.
you may need to come closer because I need to make sure everybody can hear.
Yeah, first off, I love working for this police department. It's probably one of the best in the area, and been a loyal soldier for a long time. Just with the floater and the different shifts, working all those years, and for us now to be looking for a 6th sergeant position is just going to increase our quality of life to have some type of a routine. That's really our biggest point on what's going on right now. It's just no routine. They talk about daylight savings time, losing that one hour of sleep. Come live in my world. Look at me, I'm 22 years old. Like I just really appreciate that we're at the point where we're at right now with the administration stepping up and helping out mental health and physical health of their employees. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarge. Lynn had a question?
Lynn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So this shorts us a patrol officer, right? Who's now going to become a sergeant. So does this mean that you're now going to have a similar kind of problem starting with patrol officers? Because a patrol officer becomes the sergeant, right?
They're going to jump into that, but patrol officers bid their shifts in an 8-week period right now, so they pretty much know what their shifts are going to be without it moving around. The exception to that is we do have a floater shift that's out there, but that usually is only between days and second shift. They don't really bounce as often as the sergeants do. And it's not just a matter of scheduling. That's a huge part of this, but it's also oversight that we need that's out in the field to be able to respond to calls and back officers up and help out with the decisions out in the field that are becoming more and more important, become that more important to our community. Because if an officer is out there and having to make that tough decision, you want a supervisor there. But if they're in here worrying about, counting the parking tickets and determining how many of those were done that year or whatever, they get bogged down with these small things that need to be taken off their plate and focused back on the things that matter, and that is the public and the officers and helping them out in the field to do the job that they need to do. And for a small amount of money, the $8,000 shift, we're going to save that anyways each year, more than likely with what we have going on. Will be a big help. So I think our biggest justification is because we have almost an 18% increase in that line item and why we would bump up that much.
Well, maybe to make myself clear, what I was really asking is if a patrol officer becomes a sergeant, are we going to need another patrol officer next year?
We more than likely will be coming forward, not because of this movement, but if you drive through town right now and see that the population is increasing as far as our building projects, et cetera, it's going to be based off of that. It's going to be based off of development and sort of what is going on in the world or in our community that is going to base our number of officers. So if next door they're going to potentially build a couple more housing units that could increase our population by 200 or 300 people. If there's more hotels in Mystic, if something else comes along in town, whether it's Harbor Heights or any of the other housing projects that come in that increases the number of calls, then certainly we will look at increasing police officers here based upon that. If right now, this has been an internal discussion amongst not only our supervisors, the union, and officers on what is the best reorganization for the department that we think is most effective and efficient for us to answer the calls.
Do we have unfilled positions?
Yes, we do. We currently have 5 unfilled positions.
5 patrol officers?
We had 2 retirements, and we had 3 officers that decided to do something other than police work.
Recruiting getting difficult?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Is recruiting getting difficult?
It has always been somewhat challenging. The last few years have been even more difficult. We are right now in the process of interviewing lateral transfers, which we have done very well with. We have 1 conditional offer out right now. We hope in the next 3 weeks that person, everything will go well, and they will be on hopefully by tax day, by April 15th. We had a police commission meeting earlier. Police commission is going to interview a number of other certified officers, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Then after that, we have a physical assessment with I think it is 17 recruit officers that are basically starting from 0 and hoping to be police officers. So we have a physical assessment on the 20th, I believe, of this month at the high school to assess them. We have a number of slots reserved at the police academy, which is rare right now because the academy cut out one of their classes. So we're moving as quickly as we can to get the best quality police officers we can that are interested in doing the right thing for the police department and the town. And so far, so good. We're moving as quickly as we can with the people we have.
Tim, can I ask one last question and then I'll shut up? So
Yep, go ahead.
the salaries for the 5 vacancies are fully accrued for in this budget?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've discussed this with the chief over the last few months, and in addition to the effects of HB 6004, this extra sergeant, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, will assist in the management and the additional workload that is caused by HB 6004. Is that that correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of trickle-down effect here, yes, because there's certain things, for instance, of scheduling right now. We have to schedule police officers to have drug testing. We have to schedule police officers to do mental health evaluations. So there's just this downward amount of work that keeps coming, and I look at sometimes Sergeant Diamante and the phone calls he gets from, and also Sergeant Beebe and Sergeant Marley, and all the sergeants from construction companies asking for officers, trying to fill road construction jobs, trying to do this, trying to do that, while having their ear open. You heard a portable go off a minute ago. He has his ear open. What's going on in the world? Do I have to run out to something and help somebody out? But they also have certain things that they have to do administratively to make this place work. Because if all of a sudden somebody calls in tonight, a third shift officer calls in sick, now they have to fill that. They got to go out, find out who's out there, get somebody to come in, do those type of things. And that is a constant motion here. It could be a protective order that just came in on somebody from a domestic violence case. It could be a mental health issue that they're going out to right now that we have to deal with quite a bit. We've been on a number of calls, and actually we've had to assign an officer to assist with mental health issues in our community. And we're out there doing that and following up with those type of things. So it's not ending for these sergeants, and with the amount of switching that they have to do with these shifts, it's not fair to them. So for a small amount of money, it makes administrative.
So really, Chief, what I'm hearing from you, and to all of you who are running these shifts, I've worked those shifts. That's impossible to do. I don't know how you're doing it, okay? I give you a lot of credit because I couldn't do it. I failed at it miserably. But really what you're saying is this allows them to be more effective in their job, and that the duties aren't really, yes, you've got more responsibilities, but this frees them to have a set schedule and be more effective in the everyday duties that they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years.
Right. And it also adds another body in there that you can spread those things out to, because those things aren't going away, and there's other things coming to
right. But what I'm hearing more here is much like akin to friends of mine who are doctors, and when they do their internship in med school, they're pulling miserable hours, and you're not actually at your best. What you guys, it seems like from what I heard from Lieutenant Schneider, you're trying to do here is let them be their best and help the guys in the field be their best too. So I think, did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's.
The collateral duties will remain, it's just that they'll be in better condition to execute the collateral duties. Yes. As an SEO course, critical. Boots on the ground, and there's no substitute. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's right.
That's Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just jump in with a question. So thanks for the overview. I mean, I certainly understand the logic. It was very helpful to get the additional details. I guess one question, I thought I heard that this was going to help with overtime as well. And I see that in row 21, overtime is actually going up. So can you help me connect those dots?
We continue to have overages. Right now, we are, I believe off the top of my head, 12.5% over budget because of overtime right now. And if you look back in history, I think our high one year was 190 a couple of years ago. A lot of that depends, Mike, on what goes on in the world and what happens with a variety of different factors, whether we are able to hire all 5 of those officers and fill them quickly, then we're in better shape. If we're not, if we have a large case, we have a year with 2 or 3 of these major incidents, then we're going to be going through overtime. So we've sort of kept it and adapted it to what we feel is appropriate. And our overtime, to be honest with you, Mike, if you looked at Westerly and Groton Town, not to throw them under the bus by any stretch, but I believe Westerly's overtime budget was well over $500,000, and Groton Town, I believe, was over $800,000 to $900,000 in overtime. So we've actually been very judicious in those increases, and my increases are usually tied to what the union contracts have been doing as far as increase. For instance, if overtime was $100,000 and the police officers got a 2.5% increase, then my budget would go up by $2,500 the next year. That's been my logic, to have it mirror what's going on. And obviously, if we have an overage, we've tried to make that up. If not, I've come before the board in the past years and said, hey, we're in a little bit of trouble because of what's going on and what's happened. So it sort of works. I know I'm going over this year because we're down 5 people, but I'm going to make it up with the salary line item and the officers right now that is down by 5%. So it's a bit of an offset. So there isn't anything going into the red on that at this point.
Okay. Yeah, no, that helps. Thanks. And I just want to make sure I heard the response to Lynn's question correctly, which is the 5 open positions are fully budgeted in the numbers you're presenting here, correct?
Correct. Right now, as it's presented, it would call for 7 sergeants and 28 officer line item, whereas if it was not funded, it would be the opposite. We would have had 6 sergeants and 29 officers. So it's still the bottom line number of sergeants and officers is the same, cumulative, but we now have 1 more sergeant, 1 less officer.
I guess what I'm getting at is every day we have a vacancy is favorability on that salary line, right?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thanks.
It says a lot about the department, Mr. Chairman, that they're able to attract certified officers who want a lateral. That means this is a quality work environment. So my compliments to Sergeant Beebe, Sergeant Brown, they're doing a good job. Not to mention you and the captain, the lieutenants. They're the ones that do the grunt, the work. I just try and help out as when I can. But we've been able to attract some good officers. You have Tom Holing that came from LAPD. You have Joe Saunders that came from Montgomery County, Maryland. You have Jeff Hughes that came from Arlington, Virginia. And we have Chris High, who we hired from the state police recently. So we've had a number of laterals that came in from other departments. Did I forget anybody? Other ones recently. And Rob Sunman from Montville, I'm sorry. He was a sergeant in Montville and decided to come here. So. As a patrol?
Yes. So Chris High was a sergeant with the state police, and he came here to be a patrol officer.
Any other questions from board members at this point?
I got one. What's going on with the paid holidays?
I'm not quite sure what the question is, Glenn.
Well, it's up 6.31%. I'm just curious about what the driver for that is. What am I missing here?
I think if Jim Sullivan's on the line, he may be able to address that. He usually puts some money into that one. Jim, are you there?
I am on the line. Yeah, Lynn, that's just strictly math. It's the
Miracle. Okay. I got it.
number of the wages of each position times 13 holidays at their rate and so forth.
Got it.
Longevity is built into that rate. Is that correct? Yeah.
I'm sorry, Glenn, was that a question to me?
The rate is inclusive of longevity on the individual officers and sergeants.
Yes.
So, and why are the what are the accrued leave payout 8 days? Why is that down so much, and what is that?
That is it was a year or 2 ago when the last contract was signed with the police bargaining unit. The police department staff were given the opportunity to, at the end of each fiscal year, have a cash payout for 8 days, which are, it's I guess a kind of reward for not taking sick days. And and if you go a certain amount of days, you get, if you go a certain amount of weeks or days without taking a day, you get 1 day. If you go a month, you get 2 days. So it accrues. And before it was just an unfunded benefit, but now with the latest contract, they were allowed to take it out, draw the cash down at the year end if they so chose. So what we did last year, you might recall, we had this conversation last year in the budget process where we had a book. Last year, what did we book? $186,000 in 1 year, because that's what the maximum liability was. Not everybody drew down on it. So for 21-22, if you see for department requests, I booked 190,000, which I thought would be the maximum for this year. But it wasn't drawn down on, and last year wasn't drawn down on. So 2021 wasn't drawn down on that much. So I'm going to take the bulk of the remainder of the 2021 budget and put the whole thing into a reserve fund, in a separate fund, so that because of that I don't have to accrue the whole 190,000 this year, just a $64,000 differential. It's 186 less what was drawn down this year plus what was earned this year, what people can draw down on it. So I think it's at 240. So if I take that 186, add that 64,000 and minus out something, gets me to what we need to have.
Where's the reserve fund show up?
It doesn't. It's a special revenue fund. It doesn't show up anywhere in this budget. It's similar to how we put aside money for accrued payouts for vacation and sick time when every other department employees leave. It's in Fund 228. We have a miscellaneous, not a miscellaneous, it's a miscellaneous fund, but we have a designated fund balance in those funds for Board of Ed and town employee retirements. And now going to add a third line to that, which is going to be police A-day retirements.
Okay, so this shouldn't be a particularly volatile figure going forward.
Not going forward, no.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, hi, Chief. This is Bob Satchin. I just got a quick question. You make a strong case for that sergeant move. The numbers seem to work, and that seems to make real good sense. I guess my question is the new records dispatch position. Maybe if you could provide a bit more detail on that and sort of the rationale on that and the need for that and sort of who's doing that now and how that's going to enhance. Thanks.
Absolutely, and again, I have my support staff here behind me that, we have Lieutenant Peckham that will talk on that a little bit. But this is basically something that we've been trying to do. We called it a network engineer in the past. We've called it a variety of different things, but with the police accountability bill and the body cameras that we'll be talking about as well in a little bit, comes a thing called FOI request, Freedom of Information request. So with that, when you have now video, it becomes very interesting on this. So if you think about 4 officers at a scene, a pretty significant scene with 4 cars, you have 8 cameras running, and if somebody wants a copy of that video that could go on for an hour or 2, you have to have somebody review each one of those. There's certain software that helps you out to redact certain things. But if there's a juvenile, a license plate that shouldn't be in there, a victim of a crime, things along that line, and Lieutenant Schneider will talk about that when we talk about the body cams. But that somebody has to do that. This is all new stuff that is coming down. The lieutenant will talk about the number of FOI requests that have gone through the roof. Even during COVID, we were seeing requests for information from the police department. And because of accreditation, whether it be state accreditation or national accreditation, because we have a dispatch center, we are going to have to institute new policies, new procedures, and again, that oversight that needs to happen. Again, we had 2 lieutenants, particularly Lieutenant Schneider that oversees the dispatch center. Lieutenant Peckham does the records, but they are constantly doing certain things in there, and it has taken away from what they really need to do when it comes to their duties. So this is not something that would be nice. This is something that becomes essential as we move forward. And it required me to probably assign a supervisor just to do some of the stuff that I'm talking about. That we talked about earlier, of having a sergeant do so, to be there on the patrol end. We're trying to avoid that. So from a civilian point of view, we think that would be very effective to manage our dispatch center, also manage our records department, and to be able to do these FOI requests with the videos and do a variety of different things, and also work with Roger and the IT department about all this technology that is coming into the building and how we are going to manage this, stay on top of it, make sure things are working properly, do all these different types of things, including training. How are we going to train these dispatchers? How are we going to do certain things that are out there? And with that, I'm going to just turn it over to Lieutenant Packham and go right at it.
Okay, so the FOI requests have gone up significantly over the course of, so in 2017, we had about 1,171 FOI requests. 661 of those I have to review, the rest of them are accidents, and those generally go out through the records clerks. The next year, 2018, we were up to 1,290. I had to review 696 of those. In 2019, we went up to 1,312, and of those, I had to review 800. It went down a little bit in 2020 to 734 that I had to review for a total of 1,158. But in talking to Diana DeMarco, one of the records clerks, the accidents have gone down due to people not being out as much with COVID. But if you look at the January to June that year, it was significantly higher than it had been the prior years. It kind of took a decline July to December. So the other thing is I talked to the civilian support specialist, Bob Stroll, who works in Groton Town, and he was telling me that what he does for his job. When he was initially hired, he was hired as the records supervisor, and his job was to do all the FOIs, supervise the records clerks. He was going to be in charge of the background checks for pistol permits, and he was going to be the one who did NIBRs, and he was also going to do the RMS system, or our record management system, as an administrative. He was just going to administer the administrative rights. And when he got into it and started doing what we need to do with the body cams, they ended up taking away NIBRs from him, giving it to the chief secretary to do, and then they took away the pistol permits and assigned it to officers because he was just so busy doing just the FOIs and the cameras that there was no way he could do it in a 40-hour work week, and apparently still can't do it in a 40-hour work week. So this records supervisor, civilian support specialist, whatever you want to call it, would take over. It can definitely be necessary when the body cams, due to the accountability bill, are made necessary. And just to give you an idea, right now, my present duties are the records and FOI requests. I also do all the NIBRs reporting. I'm in charge of training, which means I have to schedule all the training for the officers. I have to stay on top of that. I then file them myself into the individual files, and I'm responsible for recertifying each officer and accounting for their hours. And then I also do the schedule in-house. So any in-house overtime or the entire patrol schedule, once the chief gives me the schedule, I input it into our computer system, and then I'm responsible for managing it from there. And it doesn't sound like a whole lot maybe, but it's like it's a breathing thing. That thing changes from day to day. If I go on vacation for more than 2 days, I get phone calls from sergeants that say, hey, is this okay to move? Hey, we got to move this person. So it's a moving thing. Being in charge of training, now that's going to take up a little bit more, or a lot more time than what we were doing before, because the police academy decided to, well, they had to, because of the training, change around a lot of the mandates. I mean, we're still going to be the 60 hours mandated that we always had, but under the mandatory topics, they've added implicit bias for an hour, cultural awareness, fair and impartial policing, and procedural justice. We don't even know what that is, any of it. We're waiting for the academy to provide us with lesson plans. Once we get the lesson plans, we have to then get instructors certified to teach these things. And then we have to schedule each officer to get it. I just found out that, or recently we found out that they have changed the requirements for the officers to expire in 2021. So I'm always trying to stay a year ahead of the curve so I don't get stuck or somebody else doesn't get missed. We were all on track until the bill came. Now we have to schedule drug tests for all these officers before they can certify. And I'm going, and the way it reads from the academy right now, these implicit bias and the other courses I just mentioned, it's kind of up in the air as to whether it has to be done or not. It sounds like it does from what I read, but you talk to them and they say, don't worry about it. So I'm trying to get a solid answer on that. But this is just the beginning of what we're going to be dealing with, training-wise.
If the marijuana bill goes through, all police officers in the state of Connecticut will have to become ARI certified, which is basically a advanced drug recognition, which is at a minimum a 3-day course. So every police officer would have to do, on top of their 60 hours, the 3 days of training when it comes to that as well. So as you can see, as far as just the training goes and coordinating that, and making sure we do our use of force training that's out there that needs to be done, the recertification of every officer in the police department, which is a minimum of 60 hours, and the requirements that are out there. And he didn't even bring up that we have to do the human trafficking every year. We have to have 2 hours or 1 hour every year.
Well, now it's going to be 2 hours every year. That's going to be 1 hour every year.
1 hour every year of human trafficking training, and there's more on the horizon. So this is, you know, you're starting to get a flavor of how much stuff is going on within the PD.
And you still have to build in range qualification. You've got to qualify with your weapon.
We have to qualify 9 hours over, the academy requires 9 hours. We actually can try to double that, because what happens is, usually I can get everybody in, we never have a problem because we double it up. The reason we double it up is if somebody misses a qual, you don't have to take them back out and re-qual. So we do 2 quals a year. If the officer misses, I usually try to get an instructor to take them out, but if they don't, it's not the end of the world. But they do have to do it. It is supposed to be every year. And that's just firearms. And if you start getting it, and Sergeant Beebe can attest to this, because he's the lead firearms instructor. But we have all kinds of other mandates based on our policies for handcuffing, for baton, for anything else, because taser. All of it has to be kept up, and and it has to be lists and checklists to make sure everybody gets certified in it. One thing I forgot to point out, the Chief and I were talking about earlier, we were all talking about it earlier, was on top of these training mandates and everything else that he and I are doing right now, we're gonna have to get accredited, and we're just beginning the process with State Law Group to get the policies and procedures done. And that's something that's going to be on our plates too. That's going to take up more time reviewing policies. And and the way they do the policies now, the training's not. There's a lot more training policy-wise. So you have the academy on one end telling us you got to do A, B, C, and then because of the way things are, the lawyers and the policy, you got to make sure you do training on this, this, and this. So I mean, and there's all the stuff that you don't even think of, such as OSHA and fire extinguisher. All these things, the training is never ending. So now you take that and you take the body cams that are coming in and the amount of time it takes to review the body cams. And the sergeants, hopefully we get this other sergeant, and each sergeant's going to be tasked with doing a administrative review of those random audits of body cams. So they're going to have to take and pick, I guess Brad Town will assign one supervisor to do, 5 audits, the next one gets 5 audits, and that has to be done every quarter, or however the policy says it has to be done.
So you got an idea, like Sergeant Beebe does the firearms qualification twice a year, so he's off the road 2 weeks out of that, and also has to do the training with the area departments on active shooter and a variety of different things, handcuffing, and provide that type of training not only to our people, but the region as well, because if we need an instructor for something else that we don't have somebody for, we have to have them come in and do it as well. So we try and play very well with our neighbors in our region when it comes to training. So you think about Keith being taken off the road, how many of his work days are off the road because he has to do training and assist with that to keep officers up and going. And then you have the lieutenant that has to administer all that, make sure all the hours are there, and he is audited. How many audits have you gone through, Mike? 3 or 4?
One every year.
Yeah, one every year. He is audited by the state that comes down and checks the number of hours to ensure that everybody has done the right hours in the right categories to to ensure that, so your certification is there. If you don't do that, you're not certified anymore. And that's not good if you're not a certified officer.
And just to throw one more thing into the mix with training, aside from just the record keeping that I have to do, when Sergeant Beebe does, being the lead instructor, when he does the range, he then has to do post-certification forms for every officer. Has to go through them, he has to provide me with a lesson plan. That lesson plan has to be put into a book, made accessible when they come in, if they ever want to look at that. He has to do an inventory on all the weapons. We have an accountability system now with our ammunition, so that we know where all our ammunition's going. If you go down there, you got to sign it out. So we have to go down there, count bullets, make sure everything's there. And there's just a lot of, it sounds like, oh, it's just training, but there's a lot to it. And that's just, one part of.
This is bringing back nightmares of when I was in S3 at the brigade, so you're really hitting the point.
Exactly, yeah, exactly what's going on.
And you're responsible for everything.
Yes.
Correct. And they're talking about the training, but the position that we're looking for as a support supervisor, other PDs have already gone to this because they recognize the need right away with a variety of different the technology coming in, and to assist with, again, loosening up their supervisory staff to do the things that are important that going out on the street and handling the public on the issues that are important to them and not get bogged down with a lot of the stuff that's going on. Yeah, the administration does that, the lieutenants are gonna have to do that, but, again, we need that assistance as we move forward to remain professional. Even this accreditation that's coming, whether it be state accreditation or the national accreditation.
That's CALIA?
It's CALIA, but there was testimony this past week to keep it with the state of Connecticut Police Academy, which would save a lot of money, but it still is a monumental, I can't stress on how monumental a task it is to become accredited and the amount of time it takes. It takes literally years to get
The document everything.
including the training.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate that.
That you trained in the, everything, so.
Bob, did that get to what you were asking, Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I appreciate that. There just weren't any PowerPoint slides, so I was confused. The other one was good, but that's all. That's really good information. I appreciate it, and I appreciate sort of the reference to best practices and what other departments are doing. And I understand that the train. I'm still in the National Guard 25 years, so we get that eats up our whole time, and I know it ends up we can't even end up doing our mission the way we're supposed to. So I understand the.
He disappeared?
Okay, we heard you, Lynn, so I know it's not up.
I appreciate the thank you.
Other questions from board members?
I got one, Tim.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Who's this person going to report to?
The person would be a direct report to the two lieutenants. Would decide which one it was going to be, because they both have a separate thing here, because one lieutenant does dispatch, one does records. We would figure that out once we got the position filled and what was going to happen with it. And then from there, would respond up the chain of command.
So this is not the same job as the IT people or person that was getting floated last year.
No, we
So
had
this is
to
in response.
we had to retool.
And this is in response to 6004, more than anything?
Yeah, in part, or a good part of it, and also to keep, like we discussed earlier, a lot of our supervisory needs that are out there right now up and running, and it just makes sense. We've looked at other PDs that are doing this and how successful they are, and it's either that or we have to assign somebody to do it. And I think this way, with a civilian staff member, it is cheaper. And I know we have 75,000 in there right now. If we had to push that back for a couple months, I would, by the time we get through everything, I don't have a problem with that. But it becomes essential. Once these body cams come in, once we start to go, we have to have people on board. This just
How
isn't
far
gonna
away
happen.
are we from implementation on the body cams?
Well, we have to get your approval, so, I mean, the cart's before the horse there, so
Well,
hopefully soon.
It's a mandate.
Yeah.
It's not an
Okay.
option for the town.
And then sometime after July 1st, we would take possession of some of the equipment. We would have to do installs into all 13 vehicles, which cameras are going to go in. Then everybody would have to be trained in their use, how it would work. Roger would have a lot of work to do.
We're already overloaded IT staff. If the other IT position's approved, we're talking 3 to 6 months to hire, and then 3 to 6 months to get them trained up to speed at the police department. Beyond that, it's gonna be the three of us, me, myself, and I, getting all this done with the police department, working with Lieutenant Schneider, working with Lieutenant Peckham, getting the officers up to speed on any difficulties they have with the day-to-day operations of those body cams, with the in-car cams, work with our vendors to get the Wi-Fi access point up and running, work with the Axon vendor to make sure it's uploading the data properly.
We're a ways away.
Big hill to
We're a
climb.
ways away. Let me summarize this before we go for a half hour on this. We're a ways away.
Yes.
Okay, that was. kind of where we need to
Not
go.
far, not far.
Not far,
Well,
but
January
not close.
January's come, January 1st, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
So we-
significant ongoing cost for 6004, including the other IT person to some degree, right?
Well, let me say one thing, is that from what I've heard from the chief tonight, what I've heard from the lieutenants and everything, I don't want to blame all of this on 6004, because that's where the path we're heading down. What I've heard from a lot of these people is there's an ongoing need right now. We've had sergeants for 20, 30 years who are working shifts that are humanly, I don't know how you do it.
I
And
get
that's
that.
not a new.
I get
So
that.
I'm hesitant that we keep coming back to blaming it on 6004. I think that is incorrect. I think they've done a self-evaluation from what I'm hearing, and this is where they've identified needs and changes based on what is current practice and also what is coming down, which is going to be imposed on everything. So it's a combination platter. So I think I'm hesitant to keep blaming one thing.
Well, Lynn, the cameras themselves have been on our, last year we had, they were cut. So we were headed in that direction anyways, whether 6004 came down the pike or not. So, I mean, that was, part of the strategic plan that we have is to launch that at some point in time. It just makes good sense from a police department to do that anyways, to have that type of equipment. So it's an evolution that's here. We've done things on the cheap. As you know, we've cut corners. We've been fiscally judicious in many ways to try and save money, and it catches up to us at some point in time. It has caught up to us in a variety of different ways, that we need to do certain things to keep the ball rolling in a positive direction. So, I mean, accreditation, we were about to do accreditation a number of years ago, and we jumped into it, and it turned to be too monumental for us. We didn't have the personnel to do it. We didn't have that. If you go to a police department right now that has jumped into accreditation, they'll have 2, 3, sometimes 4, they'll have a unit. That's all they do. That's all they do. And we've tried to do it between going on calls and scheduling training and a variety of different things that are out there. It just isn't going to work without help. And we're saying we need help to institute the things that are now mandated, yes, by 6004 in many ways, but it was things that were coming anyways, not all of them, but in many cases that were going to come, just so that we stay on the edge, the cutting edge of service. Does that help? I hope.
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing any of this. The public, it's more to give you a platform to explain it to the public, because the police bill is growing, quickly. Not the bill, I mean the portion of the pie, shall we say. So it's really a forum for you.
Other questions from board members?
Chairman, this is Jim Sullivan. If I may, I'd like to inject some positivity into this conversation.
Positivity.
I don't know if there's not been anything but positivity, but go ahead, Jim.
All right. Line 50, the retirement fund. Next version, you see that number will be decreased by $21,000. I got the final contribution rate from MERS. So that's my first, the 991,000 was my best guess. So it's decreasing by 21,000 to 970,000.
Jim,
So
is
now
that still MERS? Yes.
Pardon? MERS,
That's still MERS.
MERS.
Yeah.
It's a municipal employee retirement system. It's a state retirement system for teachers and police. So that their overall year-to-year increase would move from 4.40 to 4.06 based on the budget you have in front of you.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Jim cut out there. The final difference goes from 4.40 to what?
4.06. You guys will notice there's about a 2-second delay. So we're trying to balance everybody talking. So we get into some of these sometimes.
I thought it was just you.
That's about a 20-year delay. Bob, did you get that 4.06?
Great.
Yeah.
So then just real quick, there's a couple things else on here with some increases. Like we created line 33 an accreditation expense where we already came before you about the Daigle Law Group that we have enlisted to assist us with the accreditation process. So we have to have money set aside for that. And then if you go on, some of the other line items that are there are basically flat. There are some minor increases around. We were able to save $15,000 on gas because of the playing the futures, if you want to call it, and picking a good time to lock in gas prices. But that is our operating budget to continue to day-to-day make things happen in the town in a positive way. So.
For the accreditation expense, Chief, I know that we had allocated money already.
Yeah.
Is this going to cover everything, or is that kind of a firm fixed, or is that as you get into it, that's a budgetary that you're confident with, but it could move one way or the other?
It's going to be a moving target to a degree. Like for instance, right now, Daigle Law Group has come out with 9 policies for us to review. So basically, we have an officer, the 2 lieutenants, captain, and myself that now go through a procedure. So we devote a morning or a day just for these 9 procedures, policies, then to present to the police commission and then implement them. So with that, Daigle Law Group is going to charge us per hour what they have. We have 20,000 right now this fiscal year. We should be off and running with that and be fine, no issues. Then moving forward, the 15 until we get to the final tier, which is tier 3 state accreditation, as long as the legislation changes the requirement away from CLIA, which is even more expensive. Until we get that tier 3 accreditation that they are going to require, we're going to have an accreditation expense to stay on top of that. And I think it could get down as we get that accreditation. Right. And every year we have to be audited. We have to do certain increases and changes, but I think that price comes down over time.
It should. I mean, it's the same as ISO certification. Your initial lift is monumental, and then it tapers, but it's an ongoing constant. But the 15, you feel confident in.
Correct. If it changes, I'll come back, but I don't. Okay. I hope that it doesn't go beyond that.
Yeah.
Because you figure 9 policies right now, probably another 9 coming, and then in the next, we're up to 30, 40 policies. That's a lot for a police department to digest.
Yep.
And train on, and have administered, and you get the picture.
Other questions from board members?
Yeah, this is Bob Stachin. If I could just ask one more. Chief, just bringing that 0.06 is good. And I'd throw out there that the Board of Finance at the beginning of the budget season had sent out to all agencies in the Board of Education sort of a 1.5% goal. And I know the Board of Ed has come back at 2.5%. And again, I know this is a tight budget, but if at any time during this process before we kind of finalize the budget, if you see of other areas so that we can get this piece in line. If there's COVID money out there that can cover something, or if there's ways to make this palatable from that initial standard that we had set, feel free to reach out. That would be good information so that we can kind of be consistent across the agencies. That being said, I understand it's high budget. It's fair. Those do attention, and if there's something with them and put that in line a bit more, I think it'd be a positive step. So thank you.
You broke up quite a bit, Bob, but I think we got the gist. So certainly if we see an opportunity to cut some money, and you'll hear in a few minutes from Lieutenant Schneider on the body cams, on what he's been able to do and lower that price significantly. And then I know I reached out to Danielle, who's here right now, about the COVID money that I think you have a meeting tomorrow on that, and I don't know where and how that will land. But certainly if I can steal some of that money in some way, shape, or
Utilize, not steal, Chief.
I will
Utilize. Bad word when you're surrounded by.
We will confiscate that money in some way legally to assist us in our
We
budget.
call that an appropriation.
Appropriation, yes, thank you. So I'm not sure if you want us to jump into the SIP budget at this time, and
Let me just double check one last time. Are there any other questions from Board of Finance members on the operating budget before we move to SIP? Nope, okay. We can go ahead right into SIP, Chief.
with SIP, obviously there's going to be some things in there that we're going to have to do. The body cameras is a big one. We always have a discussion on the fleet. And then we have some technology upgrades, MDT replacement, and I think MDT replacement is going to go hand in hand with the body cams, because the body cams and dash cams in the cars can't work without the MDT. So it's one thing leads to another, and nothing's cheap nowadays.
Chief, what's the MDT? I'm sorry, Chief, what's an MDT? What is that?
Mobile Data Terminal. It's a ruggedized computer. It's coffee-proof, spill-proof, donut-proof, whatever you want to call it, in a police car.
It's a hardened laptop.
Yeah, so it's not like Tim's laptop over there. If he spilled something on it, it would fry. These are in hot, cold, heated cars, freezing cold, and have to work and have a variety of different functions today, including running body cams. So the bulk of this is really Lieutenant Schneider, who has done some very heavy lifting with our vendor of choice that would be asking for a bid waiver tonight, and he's going to go over how we can save money. We started off at $610,000 for the body cams and dash cams. So tonight he's going to come forward and talk about how it's about $467 off the top of my head, and that does not include the potential for 30% reimbursement from the state of Connecticut. But again, the MDTs, which again we've been doing on the cheap for many years, only grabbing a couple a year because they're about $5,000 a piece. We have 9 right now that will not operate with the dash cams. So we have to upgrade not just the 3 or 4 that we normally do, but we're going to have to do probably 11 or 12. So Brian's going to talk to that. He was able to talk to our vendor, and they shaved $73,000 off the bill, off the bottom line right away. And he's been working on that and got him down to right now the 460 range. We have heard back from the town attorney on the disclosure or the non-appropriation clause, that he was thought it was a good idea and shouldn't be a problem. He has some other language that I don't think Axon will go for, but I don't think it changes our view on asking for a bid waiver to move this forward to save $40,000 by signing with them before July 1st. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Schneider. Again, we already recognized him during the police commission meeting on his efforts with the body cams and his negotiation skills. So, Brian.
Thanks, Chief. I have to stand. It's been a long I'm going to try to keep this really short for you. I'm going to do a high-level overview of a very complex quote that I provided you. I hope everybody got a chance to review it. If you have questions, I'll answer them again, but I'm just going to try to keep this pretty short and sweet for everybody. The body cameras that the chief just mentioned came in at $464,186. And that's not for this year, that's a 5-year term, and I'll try to explain that a little bit as we move on. We did start at 610, as the chief said. We cut a couple of things and we did some negotiation. So I'm going to get right into the quote. Basically what this quote includes is the mandates that are required through the police accountability bill. But as we mentioned this, we were talking about this prior to the bill even taking shape. It's important to remember this camera system, in order for it to work, is going to be reliant on 3 separate important phases. One's the infrastructure here at the police department itself, whether it be the internet, the Wi-Fi access points that we're going to have to install, or the required workstation and the mobile data terminals in the car. All that has to be in place and ready to go before we even accept hardware. The personnel to manage the system, we've just got into that. Our workload was saturated before. These types of things are just like the tipping point, right? We're getting to that point where we were pretty saturated, now the boat's going down. So that's where that personnel conversation just took place. And then the cameras themselves. So the quote that we're going to discuss right now is basically it supplies the department with a 5-year term for 45 body-worn cameras. And you may ask why 45? You got to have spares, right? You're going to bounce one off of the pavement. Some of them aren't going to fail to upload. So there's a few spare units that we can deploy immediately, so we're not having anybody out in the field without one. And 13 in-car video systems. The Axon quote includes a technical insurance, they call it TAP. It's just a fancy term for basically the 5-year term. But within that, they claim that you're going to get the cameras at a discounted rate. Your agency is going to make 5 equal payments, or we can divide it up any way you want. So we can front load the payments into the first year, and that's going to become important when we talk about that state grant and the 30% off. So we can divide that up, and that's a discussion that we should definitely have. But basically, it includes a lifetime warranty on the hardware. Every 2.5 years, they're going to replace all the body cameras and bring them up to speed with the newest version that they have. And every 5 years, they're going to replace the entire fleet camera system. There's unlimited cloud storage for all the video that we're going to upload and store. That's extremely important, and that's going to be cloud storage. And then we have access to evidence.com. Evidence.com is their interface they've built that allows us to redact videos, to view videos, to audit videos, and so on and so forth. The basic gist of this is that the officers are going to wear the body cameras in the field. At the end of a shift, they're going to dock them into a docking station. That's going to offload the video and charge the cameras at the same time. We kind of, and this is part of what we're asking for, we've concluded that a Wi-Fi offload point is the best way to get the video off of the vehicles and into the cloud. The only other way to do that is through an LTE connection. You just saw it happen with Verizon tonight. There's no reliability there. You don't know where there's costs that could increase significantly over the course of time. The Wi-Fi offload point is a $1,500 unit that we'll have installed on the building with the help of Roger, who got me educated on that portion of it. That is not included in this Axon quote, but I did include the quote for that through the Frontier Business Total Communications, which hopefully you have. Beyond that, I can get into the specific licensing that you see, whether it's a performance license, the redaction studio. I did provide a quick quote summary that hopefully explains those, so I don't want to get into that now unless you would like me to. A few important notes that I'd like to make, though, are the license plate readers. Currently, we maintain one license plate reader. It's a $25,000 to $30,000 option. That's been a SIP request in the future. It's been one in the past. We can eliminate that from future SIP requests, and we no longer need to maintain the one that we have based on the LPR technology that's going to go into the car. So the license plate reader now, for anybody who doesn't know, it captures license plates, stores them in a database, and and we can research them for criminal reasons. They're very helpful for identifying Amber Alerts, missing persons. That technology is going to go into each and every camera that they're supplying with us from Axon. So we can eliminate the program that we currently have now and incorporate that into this. So that's
So the
one.
dash cam will automatically do
It
it?
will automatically. It's not going to do it as effectively as a standalone unit, but it will do it. And because we're having 13 deployed in the field rather than just one, it should capture more data and it should be more effective. So that's one SIP item that you're not going to see from us in the future. That's a benefit, if you will. Again, the early enrollment incentive, there's been some, obviously, discussion on this, and that kind of brought us to today, and this kind of hurried, we need to hurry up and sign this. I tried to negotiate this with them. Basically, each quarter they offer an incentive, and at the end of this quarter on March 31st, they're going to provide us an 8% discount if we sign the contract with them prior to the 31st. That's going to save us about $40,000, just over $40,000. The next quarter of the year, you may see an incentive, but it's probably not going to be 8%, they've indicated. That's a gamble that we can take. I said it's almost impossible for me to have the town sign a contract before the fiscal year starts or before the budget's even approved. They recognize that. They've added a non-appropriation clause in the purchase agreement. That was sent off to the town attorney. He's agreeable to the terms and conditions that they've listed in the non-appropriation clause. And basically, it just states that if for some reason funding isn't available, come July 1, we can back out and walk away. We're not purchasing anything before July 1. I clarify with them. So if we sign this contract, we'll get the 8%. We can request that, and we're not ready for it now because the infrastructure and the personnel aren't in place. Come July 1, we'll push out a request for an invoice based on when they ship things. So it could be August, and we say, okay, we're ready for stuff. That's when the first invoice will come out. So we're not going to pay for anything prior to July 1. It's an agreement that come July 1, we're ready to enter into this 5-year agreement with them. Like I said, it's 5 years. If the payments are split up equally, we can front load them. One important fact is that obviously at the end of 5 years, it'll be time to renew again, and it'll be a negotiation again, and we can add and subtract things off of the contract based on how we see the last 5 years working. They're expecting a 3 to 5% increase at that time based on previous terms that they've settled. Again, this is a very complicated quote. It's ridiculous in my estimation, but I can go over the specifics with you, or I can leave it at that. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I just want to confirm, you said $464,000.
$464,000 includes the 8% discount. It does not include the 30%. However, it's not going to be 30% off the 486. It's 30% off of what we front load into the first year. So we'll have to negotiate that with Axon. How much they're allowing us to front load into that 1 year.
Well, we can front load.
And then the 30% will come
The
off.
bigger that 30%, so obviously we want to sharp.
So as much as we can push into that first year, we will, in order to get that 30% back. But it won't be the whole thing. They want a staggered approach. It's got to be a payment every 5 years.
Every year for the 5 years.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they want their money up front?
I don't know. They were very hesitant to even, they didn't even want to front load the first year for the fleet portion of it, which was about $170,000. They said that has to be divided up into 5 equal payments. There's a multitude of levels that I have to deal with Axon, and it's like, you go to the car dealership and you ask the guy, and they got to run it up the chain. So it's like it's a perpetual nightmare dealing with them, but they've been very good. But I will say that they did indicate that there has to be 5 payments across the board, although they will negotiate that front-loaded first year for us.
So they must be booking it as an installment sale. Okay.
Yeah, on the last page, or the second to last page of the quote, they've kind of broken it out into what they call the AP3 is our body-worn cameras, and the fleet as the 63 and 34, and then each year after that was 91,000. Now that number will decrease if we front-load a little bit for that first year, but we're looking at about 91,000 a year for both systems.
So it's Mike.
So there's not going to be any cost after that, right? So if you break one, we've talked to several other departments, and I should preface this all by saying we started this committee. We looked at several different vendors. This outfit is top notch. They do things great. They are phenomenal deal. Their customer service is great. And every other department that we've talked to that has an Axon product says, if you break one, you send it back within a day, there's another one replaced. The user interface has been very simple. Roger's helped me set it up. Everything's very intuitive. It works really well. There's one final thing that that's a cost not associated with this, which was the NBTs. So what we found, and thankfully Roger was there with me during one of the negotiations, this system kind of interfaces on the data terminal on the car with the body cameras and the fleet. So it kind of all interfaces with Bluetooth, and it allows you to view active events in the car. It won't run on Windows 7. 9 of our NETs are running Windows 7. They're 10 years old. They were end of life anyway, and we were hoping that we had a line item in there for a replacement of NETs. Unfortunately, that's going to have to be bumped up. There's going to need to be 9 units replaced for this system to function properly in the field. Those quotes were included too. They ran between 45 and 55,000, depending, and that was a substantial decrease from the units we deployed in the field now. So we actually shopped around and found a cheaper product to put out there that, based on all the things we're asking.
So it's Mike.
Mike, did you have?
Yeah, it's a couple of quick questions. Just still trying to make sure I understand this 30% sounds like still a little bit up in the air, but could we assume that, again, assuming we're 5 even payments of 91, 92,000, and then again, we take that 30% off, so you're probably somewhere around 65,000. Is that a reasonable assumption for what would be needed for year one?
Correct. For year one, and again, we can make adjustments to that. Based on the way the quote's written now, yes, year one would be the total dollar amount listed, and then the state is supplying 30% off. And what they do is, the way it is that they want to buy you the actual hardware. There's other buying you the body cameras is what they're trying to do and giving you 30% to that, not the cloud storage. So what they do is Axon recognizes that they stack a lot of the hardware costs into that first year for you, and then they divide it out for the payments after, so that you're in compliance with the grant.
Okay. And have we? I mean, I assume you guys have looked around at other possible grants as well. But is there anything else out there that might be a possibility? You know, at the federal level or state level, or is this really the only thing you've found so far?
I think this would probably be it for what we're looking at on the state level, what they're providing at the 30%.
The only thing, Mike, that I've heard is that some of the federal money, because after the election, some federal money from the Department of Justice, because a lot of stuff was held up, may be coming loose, but we don't know what that exactly will be. I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office yesterday, their liaison, so we had a chat on future grant opportunities. So he's just standing by until he gets a green light on what's out there, but there's obviously no guarantee. It is even a little bit of a risk with the state with the 30%, because don't forget, we're going to be vying against probably 60 to 70 police departments in the state that have no body cameras, and then other ones are going to be replacing older ones with this grant. That is a heavy lift for the state of Connecticut for money-wise. I believe they have $4 million set aside right now, but that is a drop in the bucket compared to what is probably going to be needed that's out there. So the sooner we get up and going, and the sooner we get our grant application in, it just came out last week, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
All right, makes sense. Thanks.
Other questions from board members?
Yeah, it's Deb Norman. I'm just curious, and you think 45 is is there any wiggle room in that, or do you think 45 is exactly what you need?
As far as the number of body cams itself, I think that's appropriate based on, we do have a small portion of officers that are still reserve officers. They would have to wear them.
Gotcha.
And it's important to have one assigned. So just so we don't get ourselves in any trouble and not have one to be able to be deployed in the field at any given time, I don't want to lose 2 or 3 and then be struggling to have somebody sitting in the, so I think that's a fair estimation, correct?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions from board members?
Yeah, what's a reserve officer?
A reserve officer is just not, it's a sworn officer that's just not full-time. They come in, we had a staff of about 4 to 5, that's dwindled down to about 2 right now. But they come in, they essentially help out with all of our special events in town. So they'll do a lot of work for the parades, they'll provide some extra coverage. One of them's a Marine unit officer, so he's out on the police post. So,
Lynn, we've had as many as 15 over the years, but because of the training requirements, you have to have all the training that any police officer would have. So you have to do the 60 hours, you have to do all the requirements as far as recertification goes. So we are down to 2 officers. We also have approximately, when this was pre-COVID, 56 special events, runs, walks, regattas, tastings, you name it, we have it. People come to Stonington and want to have events, and the reserves have helped out with that, and we're down to 2 right now. So that usually means that a regular officer has to assist with those events.
So this is not those summer parking ticket Nazis?
I'm not going to answer that one.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Other questions from board members?
Chairman, this is Jim Sullivan, if I may weigh in here.
Go ahead, Jim.
I got some issues just with the proposal the way it is. I have to satisfy my inner accountant here. We're looking at 2 things. It seems to me we're purchasing hardware and a service agreement. I think they need to be bifurcated in some manner so we know exactly what we're paying for the hardware, which we might possibly need a bid waiver for, and if we're buying it, agreeing to buy it all up front, and we're paying it for over time, then that would actually be a debt agreement. We could treat that, we could sign a debt agreement without too much fuss, as long as we do have the non-appropriation clause in for year after year for those 5 years. The service agreement, we wouldn't have to necessarily enter into a contract unless a 5-year contract, unless Axon demanded that. But for other esoteric, accounting reasons, I need to know what we're paying for what, over what term, whether we're paying the hardware up front, the service agreement over years. This proposal needs to be broken down in a more clear way for my purposes.
So, Jim, it's Brian. I've talked to them. The problem is that what they call TAP is an inclusive program that incorporates cloud storage, hardware, and all these things. And what they do is they basically break it down into quote for dollar amounts, but the 5-year term that includes all of those things incorporates like the storage and the hardware. So I don't know. I kind of looked at it with them before. I can ask them again to see if they can break it down differently.
Well, let me ask. I'm sorry. Let me ask you this question, Brian. At the end of 5 years, and I know from the earlier conversations, you're going to turn the equipment over, turn it back, and they'll replenish it. But at the end of 5 years, do we own the equipment, the physical equipment? If we're just leasing it for 5 years, then it's not that much of an issue. But if we actually take ownership of it, then it is an issue. We have to book it on our books as a capital asset, and it's more of a accounting mumbo jumbo than
Sure.
So I need to understand
Jim,
that.
Let me maybe suggest this, because I think that We just got the opinion from the town attorney this evening, right before the meeting. I don't think we're in a position that we can approve anything tonight. We will 100% put it on whatever agenda, whenever we need to do it before the 31st, and get everything done when we have our ducks in a row, okay? You have that commitment from me and from the board.
Sure. What
I think might be good is for you and Jim to get together and make sure we've got all these little details ironed out. Like you said, a couple of the wordings here that the attorney put in, I agree with your assessment of it, Lieutenant Schneider. But let's go back and see what they do. Let's iron out the details from an accounting standpoint, which I agree with Jim, that if we own things versus lease it, it's different, what we got to carry on the books and carry as assets. And we can dot all those I's in a short amount of time. I don't see that being a big hang up here.
Sure, and Jim, I can get with you, and we can arrange a meeting with the sales rep, and he can punch through some of the questions that you have really quickly.
And I think also part of that is really what do we want to spend on that front end becomes important, because are we going to do the 91,000 a year, or are we going to load it as much as we can to begin with to have the 30% potentially offset that?
Boy, that's one of my questions too. If the equipment is $300,000, that hardware, and we're going to own it, let's buy that up front and let's get $100,000 back from the state versus, does it matter how much is going towards hardware versus service agreement? That's something we need to understand about the grant as well.
Yeah, I think that, I think the sense of the board, which I haven't really gotten from anyone anything different, and if it is, please speak up, but is that we'd like to take as much of the opportunity as we can to try and get that 30% back.
Absolutely.
Understanding, Chief, that we're all going in for the same small pool of money, but let's try and maximize that. And I think that the opportunity, Jim, for you and Lieutenant Schneider to work together to make sure that we're clear, because that was one of the questions we asked the last time you came before us, Lieutenant, was, okay, is it just hardware? Is it just this year that they think the grant is going to be written for? It just came out. I haven't seen it myself. Jim, I don't know if you have looked at it either, the terms of it, but we want to make sure we maximize that, to maximize our efficiency.
Well, I did look at it, and it's not clear. That's why I raised the point again.
And it's not clear to any of the people that are up at the state level either. I've called them, and nobody can give me a straight answer.
So I think, given that there's still uncertainty, we got to just take our best estimate, know what our risks are going into it, know what we're trying to do, and, know that we're committed to keeping you guys as best we can. So.
And the only thing I ask is the consideration of also the fact that there's that infrastructure portion that I kind of laid out there that will also have to be part of that first year in order to get this program implemented. And that the key replacement and that access point are going to be critical to. Maybe,
Lieutenant Schneider, if I could ask this, maybe you could send me, and I can distribute it to the board members, kind of break out the concise summary.
Yep.
One little paragraph. This is the infrastructure we need. This is what we got to do. Now that we've heard it, we understand it a little better. Okay. Then we can plug that in, and then you and Jim can figure the details, and we can get this.
I know. I wish I had it all for you bundled up, ready to go tonight. It's just been. I was getting the last quote just the other day.
Totally understood. It's not a problem. We're used to that kind of thing.
Trying to save 40 grand.
Trust me, I see the carrot. I get it.
I'm more than happy to work.
But yeah, what we can do to kind of make that clear to everybody, so we don't handcuff you guys in a way that we're not realizing that we're doing.
Sure.
So that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
The only thing I'll say is there's many police departments that have done this in communities already, so it's obviously doable. So it's just a matter of crossing those I's and dotting the T's to make sure it happens, bid waiver and everything. And I think Board of Police Commissioners approved it tonight as well, based upon that, trying to save that money that's there. So.
And we're committed to doing that too, Commissioner O'Shaughnessy, so you hear that from us. But I just want to make sure we get every I and T dotted and crossed, because we'd hate to make a misstep and then either miss something or overcommit and not realize that we're doing something wrong. So I know it's fluid. I know these things are complex and run together, so.
Right there with you. I agree with Jim all the way. Just, I'll work on all the details and I'll try to get to you earlier than
Without working on it in absence of all the other.
Be short and sweet.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I'll check with OPM again. I've been on the phone with them numerous times on the grant, working through some language on behalf of all the chiefs in Connecticut to get that out and going. So they've been actually pretty good. It's just a matter of bonding and other stuff as well, and requirements. So we had to work through some of the requirements that would have increased the cost that's out there in the language in the grant application. So we'll take it from there. As far as the rest of our presentation goes, Brian, if you want to just stay up there, there's the cars and MVPs. you want to stand up, right?
I did.
Yeah.
So I noticed the three of you, Director Kaiser, Ryan, and you, Chief, have the same hairstyle.
That was because we were, you know what, that was because we worked all those third shifts and those other schedules, right, Brian? That's what it did to us.
Where do we want to pick that
Then what happened with the ones in the back? Because they're working on the third shift too.
Better jeans.
You're only 22, we're only.
Yeah, that's right, that's it.
We're older and we're talking.
All right, Lieutenant Schneider, go ahead and cover the rest of it.
Where do we want to pick back up?
Cars.
I'll take that.
No, that's not it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I got the wrong, I handed you the wrong one.
Basically, it's the same talk every year. The cars are really important. I've had the fleet now, and I've been in charge of the fleet for probably 10 years. I think it's pretty critical to make sure that there's a safe, clean, reliable environment for the officers to be in. And the way we found that to come down the line is to replace 4 cars a year. We've been doing 3 marked cars and 1 unmarked car for a long time, and it's worked very well. When we start to cut that, we see this trickle-down effect. And we saw that this year. Unfortunately, on an officer that was involved in an accident about this time last year, it totaled out the vehicle, and that vehicle just came back online. The replacement vehicle just came back online this week, actually today. So all that mileage that would have been accumulated on that new car that unfortunately was taken offline was dispersed out to the rest of the fleet. And that's what will happen any time that we cut that. And I know it's a big dollar item, but there's also that huge offset that we always talk about with road construction. And I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but usually that floats around $100,000 a year. Jim, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have that number right in front of me, and I apologize. But that number that we get back for charging private duty companies for the use of our cars for road construction is a substantial offset to the number that we asked for.
I believe it was 110. 110 sound right?
I think it'll be about 105 this year, which is kind of low. In the past, it's been more, but I think that you're on track for about 105 or 110 this year. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm sure, I know this is a sticking point, but does anybody have any questions? I'll be happy to answer them on that. The price of the cars stayed about the same. They always do. The upfit price is always stayed the same. They've been treated us very well over in Westerly. Their labor rate hasn't moved in about 8 years, which I'm waiting for.
We're still buying the Ford Explorer.
Still buying the Ford Explorer. There's a very limited options out there. The Ford Explorer is actually one of the cheaper options. I'm not speccing it out in any way that's excessive by any means. There's ballistic panels. There's all kinds of things you can put in vehicles nowadays. None of those things are on board. This is the bare necessities to get us out on the road and moving. I take a lot of pride in the fleet. I heckle the heck out of the officers. I always tell them, it's the most visible thing that we have that represents our department. Take pride in it, and we treat them with care and a lot of respect. Sergeant Marley's always out there helping me out. I mean, it's a full-time job in itself to maintain the fleet of cars that we have. But if you have any questions, I don't really have any more to add on that.
Any questions from board members?
Tim, I got one that's not about the cars. I know you're shocked, but it's back to that contract. Did you say, Lieutenant, did you say something about they didn't know how much they would allow us to front load?
So that's a negotiation, right? You can go to Axon and you can request a dollar amount, and they'll negotiate it with you on what you can put into that first year. I don't know why I asked him, and again, it's much like going to the car deal. They run it up this line, the chain of command at their office, and they come back with a number. You never talk to the guy.
Do you have an idea when you're going to know that number, or what are you asking for? Do you need us to tell you what to ask for?
Well, I think it would be helpful to have a quick discussion on what's the, I will max that out to the fullest extent to ensure that we can, and those terms can be negotiated, I believe, after the fact, but I would like to do it beforehand and have it locked in. But that's something that I can negotiate fairly quickly with him. I don't think there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Usually he's pretty good about giving me the bottom line.
Lynn, my goal would be to front load it to $467,000, and then for the next 4 years, pay $1 each year. That would be my.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm not sure they'll do that, but we can shut it.
Well, we're going to try, right? Okay.
Other questions from board members?
MDTs. The MDTs, those are the mobile data terminals. I referenced those when we talked about the Axon implementation. So we were asking for 19. Unfortunately, that 19 isn't going to cover what we needed to do. We typically replace a few MDTs periodically, and that gets us through. Some of our MDTs, as Roger Kaiser can attest, are at their end of life. They're 10 years old. The company itself is shocked that they're still functioning in the cars. We actually asked if we can put, they're operating on Windows 7, and Axon needs them to be at Windows 10. We asked the company that, their current vendor, hey, can we ship these back to you and put Windows 10 on them? And they were like, absolutely not. We're not even touching them. So what we did is, Roger and I met with the vendor a few weeks ago. We looked for a little bit more of a cost-effective unit based on the fact that we're seeing that we were going to be replacing 9 units instead of the 19,000. And in turn, I think we found a viable solution. We were probably looking at trying to buy one out of our current operating budget to test it. But what it'll do, it's going to do a few things. One, it'll eliminate the 19, although it's going to go up. But we won't be asking for much after that. Two, we currently have a $1,200 modem in the car that was usually given to us by AT&T. They're not giving those away anymore. So that $1,200 modem is another item that I'm going to have to add on to the cost of the fleet of the car. The tablets that we were using now have an internal modem that they claim has an external antenna and works very well. That will eliminate that $1,200 fee moving forward. We looked at 2 options. I'll be honest, one's 45, the other one's 55. We're asking for a lot. I get that. The only reason I put out a $55,000 option and a discussion with you as a board is that I don't know where police work's going to lead us in 5 years, and we're going to have these for the foreseeable future. The difference in them is that the $55,000 units are completely removable from the car, from a docking station, completely usable in the field with a keyboard. Meaning, we're at the hospital and I need to take a statement from a victim. I can bring my tablet now in them, have them digitally sign on the tablet, and I can type the statement up right in the hospital with the internal modem and send it back to the PD all remotely. Are we doing that now? No. Do I see us doing that in the future? Absolutely. So that top dollar amount, that $55,000 for the MDT replacement, is something that I think is very prudent to look at, so that we're not coming back to you in a few years saying, hey, police work's changed again and I need more money. I think this is looking forward, and I think police work is changing and evolving pretty rapidly, and this is a required piece of equipment. And that's going to be also, a side effect of the Axon implementation, unfortunately.
So you're saying take the 19 and move it to 55?
And move it to 55. Yeah.
Now, what about the technology upgrade that's 20?
Well, we kick that one right back to the chief.
You haven't talked enough? You want to? We've done that traditionally each and every year to, again, as you can see, the amount of technology that continues to come down the pike with us, to us, including state requirements as far as our infrastructure goes. Roger, you've tapped into that fund a few times for switches, modems, you name it, to keep us up and running. So that has been one of those, it saves our butt account as technology has come our way. For instance, we've had to replace our APIS machine, which is an automatic fingerprint machine. So if there's something of a big ticket item that we have to pay for that we are not ready for, we have that money there and it's readily available. We're able to save over the years money into that account that bought our RMS system, which is Records Management System, which we're not even going to touch that this year or go near it. But our Records Management System is now over 12 years old and it just isn't doing it for us anymore. It's all migrated to a variety of different things, in-car ticketing and stuff like that, the state may require us to do. No more handwriting of tickets. You have to do them on a computer and transmit it to the court. Our records management system does not do that. So we're constantly fighting that battle that's there. So that particular fund has saved us because we've been able to squirrel money away each and every year, or almost every year, that has been there for us when we needed it. It bought our phone system. It did other things that when we had a failure or a catastrophic failure or something, we had the money there and available to jump off and go with. It's there right now. We talked about the boat grant last time. If we needed some of the money, that's where we were going to pull it from. If we couldn't pull it out of our operating budget, it would come out of the technology, because it's a technology upgrade fund. So that's been used by us to do that. And I think that's really it, other than we have the cars, we have the technology upgrade, the MDT replacement, and the body and cruiser cameras. We have $500,000 in on body cruiser cameras. It obviously is down to $467 for the cameras at this point in time. And if we're able to save 30% on some of that, that brings it down even further. And I would say that if we're able to do that, we would fund those line items, and you can play the shell game with those two accounts. But if you know, they're sort of intertwined with each other, so no matter what we do, as far as if we keep some money in the MDT account and keep the camera, the MDT replacement account, we're going to be pulling from that fund anyways to get the cars up and going. It will be a question that I'll have for OPM if the laptops could be, MDTs could be part of the 30% as well. So I think as long as we keep that healthy to a point, money-wise in there, that if I'm able to do that with OPM, that would be also assist in us going forward. So maybe if we kept the 19 in that particular account for the MDTs, but keep a robust camera and cruiser camera, body and camera account, we may just have to play off of those to make whatever the best formula is.
Leave the numbers the same for now, and then look at a transfer between item to item.
Correct. Yes. So, yep. That makes sense.
Chief, is there any money in that technology account?
So off the top of my head, I could be wrong. There is, I believe, 42,000 off the top of my head.
So it's Mike, if you had to prioritize, am I correct that's where you do some prioritization, is in that technology upgrade account, that 20 versus one less cruiser or reducing the MDTs?
I'm not quite sure what the question is.
If you had to prioritize to keep a cruiser, to get one less MBT, to drop the technology fund, which is your lowest priority, which would you, if you had to pick one, which would you?
Well, you have $42,000 that's right there. I'd rather spend the $42,000, for instance, on the MDTs right now, but keep the cruiser. The cruiser, I can't stress enough. Year after year, we talk about it. That is the office of most police officers, and me, within short order, when you get them in, they're christened in a variety of different ways, and it's how officers go on emergency calls. It's one of the backbones of the PD, so I'm always hesitant to go away from police cars. I'd rather use that 42,000. I'd have to check on that again. I'm doing it off the top of my head. If that 42,000 is right there and we can go out and buy the MDTs right now, or a good chunk of them, to be ready, I would rather do that. But
Okay, thanks.
if I can lump the MDTs in with the
That's
grant.
the maximization of the grant reimbursement is what we gotta be cognizant of.
Correct.
So,
And the MDTs are necessary to institute the body cam. So,
but I think Mike's question was more the additional 20 for next year for the technology upgrade. If you've got 42 already in there,
I'd rather have a police car than that.
then
Right.
leave the police car, drop the 20 down if you had to drop something going into next year, because you've still got the 42. Okay,
Yep.
that kind of cover that, Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, that was exactly it. You summarized it well. Yep, thanks.
Other questions from board members? Nope.
One last thing.
Yeah.
So we had another sergeant come in, Teresa Hirsch. She's our newest sergeant. She did all the COVID-19 visiting everybody, saved a woman's life in the middle of all this stuff. Been involved, jumped off to a nice start as a new sergeant. But she's also working those funky things going around. And I just wanted to say, and I should have did it at the beginning, and not stress enough, the job that everybody has done in this building under some very difficult times that we've faced in the public and with COVID and a lot of uncertainty in the world on a variety of different levels that are out there. They've come to work. They're here. They are going out and, like in Teresa's case and many others, saving lives, helping people, still going to the schools, there day in and day out, and getting the job done, and in face of some pretty difficult times. So any support that you've always been supportive of the police department. I know we have a heavy ask again this year. Some of it is based upon the world. We recognize that, but we've always tried to do things fiscally responsible, and it has caught up to us. And we've talked about with Danielle quite a bit that doing on the cheap. We come in and only want 3 MDTs a year, or every 3 years, MDTs. It caught up to us. You know, it's caught up to us with our supervisors. A lot of things have caught up to us. But I didn't want to focus everything on the negative that's out there. We have extremely talented, dedicated officers here that are showing up to work, doing things day in and day out to make this town better, to make it safe, and helping people. And again, we appreciate everything that the board has done to help move that forward.
Thanks, Chief, and I would be remiss if we didn't thank you all for what you do, because my job is a lot easier than yours is, so.
You deal with explosives.
Yeah, well, it's a different problem. I can control anything I interact with, so. But we really do appreciate the job you guys have done. I'm so happy that the radios are working so well. That was a huge success. That, you know, we went through a couple iterations on trying to figure out which was going to work right, and I'm glad you got it right. And Lieutenant Schneider, it sounds like you've done the work on these cameras, and we're set up for success again. So giving you all the right tools to do the right job, I mean, that's part of our job. We're not going to give you every single tool at every moment that we can, but we're trying to support you as best we can and make sure you guys can and girls can do, and females and males, and I don't know, oh God,
Give up.
I'm gonna get in so much trouble. My wife is gonna kill me. But thank you for all you do day in, day out, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
I gotta tell you, this is starting to sound like accountants and managers. It's impressive. I really am impressed. Presentations.
I'll take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment. It's a huge compliment.
If you can impress a member of the other, you all deserve an A for the day.
All right, before I totally get sidetracked, which I've already done. The next item on the agenda is discussion of the approval of police body service cameras with Axon. I think we've all agreed that we're going to push that out a little bit. We'll put it on we'll make sure it's on the agenda for the next meeting. Should we need, I don't think, that's Tuesday, so I don't think we can do anything faster than that. But if tomorrow something comes up and we need to do something on Monday, you make sure to let us know.
I can absolutely do that. I'll provide constant feedback to Jim and keep him in the loop as well. And honestly, I'll make every attempt to even bump out that early signature incentive, maybe a week or two even.
We actually,
to see if
we've got some time. I mean, as much as we're pressing it, we've got some time here.
So I'll see what I can do.
We have 2 meetings next week alone.
Yeah, so we've already got scheduled meetings that we can easily add you to. So we're not pushing this off in lack of support. It's not get the details.
I completely understand, and I want to do everything I can to help you come to a decision.
Perfect. The data's been great, so I appreciate all the transparency you've had up till this point.
Hopefully it wasn't too long.
No, I'd rather it be that long, and then we can summarize it easy. So
Very
no
good.
problem. Next item on the agenda is possible discussion of Board of Finance follow-up questions from earlier departmental presentations. Does anyone have any questions? This is kind of, we've got that as a placeholder, but I don't think there was anything new from our last meeting 2 nights ago. So if anyone has anything, please bring it up now, but I'm not anticipating anything. Hearing nothing. Okay, budget calendar. At this point, there's no reason to change or amend anything, so we will leave the calendar and the hearing meeting dates as is. With no more business before this board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Deb. Motion from Glenn, second from Deb Norman. All in favor, aye. Great, we're adjourned. Thank you much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.